Welcome to the Higher Ed Demand Gen podcast, helping higher education marketing leaders share knowledge about learning, strategies, and tactics that are relevant today. See what you can learn today by listening to one of our episodes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Higher Ed Demand Gen podcast hosted by Concept 3D. If you like our content, please follow and subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple, and Google. My name is Shiro Hattori, and I will be your host today. And today I'm really excited to talk about why we should break the habit of overpricing and over discounting tuition. For the conversation, I have Emily Coleman joining us today. She is an enrollment management expert, starting her career at Syracuse and eventually co-founding HAI Analytics. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Shiro.
It's great to have you here. And I do ask all my guests this. Please tell us what you love about higher ed, Emily.
Oh, there are so many things I love about higher ed. I love just kind of the atmosphere on a college campus and that everybody is sort of passionate about what they're doing. And you have people doing drastically different things in terms of professors in different departments. So I loved being on a college campus and kind of working with Syracuse. But now I get to be on lots of different college campuses. So I think it's just the intellectual atmosphere I really, really love.
Fantastic. Do you recall which campus you were most recently on?
Yes, Marquette University. I was most recently on just a couple of weeks ago.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, I don't get the opportunity. I love going to campuses too. It's like one of my favorite things. And I'm a CU buff, a CU University of Colorado alum. And so I tend to go there, but I always love checking out other campuses. It's such a beautiful feeling.
Yep, it is.
Well, let's jump in. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and your current role today?
Sure. So I have a PhD in social psychology. And when I finished grad school, I wanted to use kind of the statistics portion of my degree. I had never heard of enrollment management. I kind of happened into this job at Syracuse through a friend of a friend. I was hired to build their predictive models of retention, of yield, and I loved it. And I loved, being on a college campus. And I was there for 12 years, and then I left there and went to work at another higher ed consulting company. We did a lot of financial aid optimization, helping schools figure out, how to be strategic with both admissions and financial aid planning. And I did that for several years. And then in 2018, left with a colleague and co-founded HAI. We also are a higher ed consulting company. We're sort of full service. We do a lot of predictive modeling for every stage of the student life cycle. We do a lot of financial aid optimization, strategic planning, working with schools to, figure out how they can meet their goals.
Amazing. I did have one question about strategic planning. Like one thing I talk about on this show a lot is getting marketing a seat at the table more at the strategic planning level. Is that something you're seeing with your customers, or do you believe it's a need in the industry?
There's a lot of variation. I think we definitely, with some partners that we work with, that is very much a part of kind of the enrollment management team. And then in other instances, it isn't as much. And I totally agree with you. It really does need to be. A lot of times what we are brought in to look at is how a school can better use their financial aid dollars to hit their goals. And that is, sort of a shorter term fix. I mean, it can be long term, but it can kind of work quickly. But without that, building the brand and the marketing and all of that other stuff, you just get into this process where you're just sort of chasing your tail all the time, trying to kind of catch up. And so I think it has moved a lot in the right direction, but certainly still a ways to go.
That's good to hear that there's some progress being made. And I know in this call today, like I talk about the importance of marketing a lot because I feel like marketing does feel the pressure that a lot of enrollment goals do weigh on them in
Hmm.
hitting their goals, and you need a seat at the table if you're going to make impact there. But I am excited because we'll get to talk about the other part, which I believe is the big elephant in the room, which is around pricing and finances. And so I'm glad we'll get to talk about that. But first, I'm curious, in 2018 when you launched HAI, like how are you feeling in that moment, finding this business and company with your co-founder?
Um, I was excited. I think I probably was not as nervous as I should have been, but I'm sort of optimistic, and we felt like we had a service to offer the market that wasn't being offered. It was sort of a
Mm-hmm.
void that we saw. So we were excited to kind of get out there and start to offer that, and certainly didn't know all of the little bumps in the road that come with starting a company that have nothing to do with the work that we do. It's more just kind of the logistical side of things. But I was excited about it then. I have no regrets. I, still think it's the best thing that I've ever done. It's super challenging, but I love that. It's never boring. You're kind of always trying to figure something out. We're a small company. So yeah, I guess just excitement.
That's great to hear. And I know we were just speaking about Jamie Hunt, who was my guest on the 100th episode. She did something similar, not in enrollment management, but in marketing, right? She left her role and started her own boutique agency as of now. I know Nikki Sundstrom, who's was at Michigan and also at University of Indiana, started her own boutique agency as well. And so I know there's a lot of need for help in higher ed marketing, enrollment marketing. So it's great to see this trend. Awesome. Well, let's talk about one of the things you are passionate about. I know that you've been working in or adjacent to higher ed for 20 plus years, and tell me about your burning topic around overpricing and over discounting.
So, it's a very complicated subject, and I don't want to sort of oversimplify things, but we have seen the cost of college, particularly for private institutions, just skyrocket over the last 30 years. And with that increase, there has been an increase in the discount rate. So just like when you go to buy a car, when you go to college, you often are not paying the sticker price. You're paying some sort of discounted price, and the level of that discount depends on a lot of different things: what your family's financial need is, sometimes what your academic credentials are. But we're at the point now where the latest number for private institutions is that the average tuition discount rate is 56%. So that means if you take all of the private institutions, on average, people are paying 44% of what that kind of sticker price is, or what the listed price is. And this is problematic for all sorts of reasons. One is that there are certain populations for sure that don't know this. And that's something that we talk with a lot of our clients about, is how do you get that information to students who maybe are first generation, who are in lower resourced communities or high schools where there isn't anyone there to kind of tell them that this is how it works. So I
Mhm.
think schools are losing out on a whole group of students before they even get into sort of the very top of the funnel at the inquiry stage, because they see that cost and think there's no way that I could possibly do that. So the other thing that happens is that as well, let me back up for 1 second and talk a little bit about how I think that we got to this place, because it isn't like you go to a college campus and everyone who works there is a billionaire. This isn't, a big for-profit industry, and yet the cost to attend college has gotten so high. And part of the reason that I think that happened is there was kind of this wave of, the economy was good, and parents sending their kids to college wanted They wanted all the amenities. They wanted air conditioning and brand new gyms and new dorms and all of these things that make sense. I mean, you're paying for this. You want the best for your child or for yourself. But what happened is there was kind of this culture to compete with that. So there were the schools that could afford to make those renovations and upgrades, and just continue on. And then there are the schools that felt like they needed to do that in order to compete, but didn't necessarily have the resources. So you end up needing to sort of, it's kind of backwards in terms of what's driving the budget. The budget isn't being driven by what can we reasonably expect to bring in. It's more, this is kind of what this costs. And so now this is what we need to bring in order to support this. So that has been a big problem. And as we see the discount rate, every year it's another 2 percentage points higher. So eventually that is unsustainable. So if you get to where you have an 85% discount rate, which many schools do, believe it or not, eventually you get to that 100%, and then, there's just no revenue. So, it is, as I said, sort of, it's complicated. It takes kind of that long-term investment and that long-term planning. Schools don't always have the luxury of doing that. Mm-hmm. There are more and more colleges competing for fewer and fewer students. So it's kind of this perfect storm of, it's almost like the housing bubble where, it just keeps growing and growing, and it has to burst at some point. And when it does, there are going to be, people who lose in that, and schools that lose. And we're starting to see some of that. I mean, you see kind of every week another small private institution announcing that it's closing or merging. So there really is, we're starting to see the tide turn in terms of what's sustainable in the market.
I had just one clarifying question, which was, I believe like the percentages that we're speaking to right now are specific to private institutions and schools. Mm-hmm. Is that right? Cool.
That is true. Yes. And the discount, so public institutions discount as well, because they start at a lower base, the discount rates aren't as high. But yes, what I'm referring to are private institutions. And what a lot of people don't realize is that students who are from, disadvantaged backgrounds, very low income, it can actually be less expensive for them to attend a private institution than it is to attend a public institution, because we've worked so hard to create resources for these students, and there's federal funding and there's state funding. So all kind of good things. But where we're seeing really the squeeze is in the middle. So you have the highest income families are able to pay, they're willing to pay. Higher education still has an incredible return on investment. So I don't want to make it sound at all like it's not worth it. It absolutely is. And, people can see that. So you've got kind of the higher income, they're able to pay. The lower income are getting all of this financial aid. Mm-hmm. But then you sort of have this middle band of middle income families where they're not qualifying for need-based aid from the institutions, but they can't afford kind of the big sticker price. So that's really where we're seeing the pain being felt. And a lot of institutions, private institutions, now kind of have this U-shaped distribution of family incomes where they have a lot of students at the lowest end and a lot of students at the highest end, and not as many in the middle, which is, unfortunate. I mean, I think just sort of it's been the American way to kind of bolster the middle class and help people move upward socially. Right. So it's unfortunate that this is now kind of happening.
Yeah, and everything I'm reading, I know we're taking these things like super broad, but also I've heard like, middle class, especially like upper middle class is shrinking, right? And you're getting more like low end of middle class now with globalization and everything. And so like if less of those students are also going to college, it's just going to compound over time and create more disparity, right?
Yep.
That's my assumption. So
Yep.
that's a really good point. And then I was trying to visualize like these numbers around, you said in private schools, students typically pay 46% of sticker price. I believe you pulled a statistic for me, which was in the last 10 years, the percentage of students that received discounting grew from 80 to 91% in private institutions and schools. So I'm just trying to imagine like walking into any retail store and like 90% of the products are on sale. Like it
Yep.
just doesn't look good. And I know the process, the sticker price doesn't show like a big red minus 54%,
Right.
like when you go to the website, but just trying to picture what this looks like. It's not good, right? Like there's no, the business of having almost everything on sale, like usually doesn't work for the favor of the business when you look at like retail or
Absolutely.
traditional business industries. So I can't imagine it's good for higher ed either.
No, definitely not. And so there has been this movement toward kind of tuition resets where, instead of charging everyone 44% of the, but saying we're charging this, let's just lower the tuition down to whatever that 44% mark is. And that has mixed results. I mean, it's the kind of thing that I am passionate about wanting that sort of thing to work. I feel like that's what we need. We need everyone to sort of agree on this. But it hasn't, it's those first brave kind of schools that go out and do that sometimes it has backfired because families will think, okay, well, why are they all of a sudden they've cut their tuition in half. Something must be wrong. They must feel like it's not worth the investment. So it is a very tricky situation that higher ed institutions are in now.
Gotcha. And then I'm just trying to think of more from the student and maybe the supporting family or constituent perspective. How do you think this process of, overpricing with the sticker price and discounting affects student demand, especially like in the private institution sector where this is a bigger issue? Like, how do you think it affects some demand?
That's a really good question. I think that, we have been seeing and we will continue to see the population of college going students is shrinking. So schools are competing for fewer students. And I think that, again, with the demand, it's kind of the highest income families get it. And they can kind of make a decision about what is worth the investment. Hopefully the lower income families are getting some sort of support in the community if the parents haven't been to college themselves, to sort of educate them about what's possible. But it's the middle class that's kind of saying we can't even, they're not even looking anymore at private institutions. They're, going to public institutions, which is fine. I mean, I'm a big believer that you get out of an education what you put into it. And I don't think that there's any school where, if you put your all into it, you're not going to gain from that. So I don't mean to disparage private institutions, but it is kind of disrupting the balance of just, freedom to kind of choose your own path, basically.
Gotcha. Thank you for explaining that in detail. Shifting gears a little bit more towards the positive lens, which is, right, you co-founded HI Analytics and you've been in business for a few years now, and you've worked with many partners and clients. So Emily, what specifics do you look at when you first get a client and you're like, hey, how do I zone in on the place where I need to fix or look at some data? Like what's your process for starting? And if you have any examples, that'd be really helpful.
Sure, yeah. So the first thing that we do is we gather as much data as we can for some period of history, like the past 3 years. So starting at like the very top of the funnel when students first identify themselves to an institution or an institution identifies a student that they want to recruit, we're looking at what are the demographics of that pool? How many people are in that pool? What is their conversion to applicant? And then, following it down out of the students who are admitted, what percentage enroll? we're taking, it's really like hundreds and hundreds of variables, and we're building statistical models that look at the independent effects of every variable that has a significant impact on whatever the behavior is. So let's say it's enrollment. So if we're looking at all of the application and financial aid factors, we're looking at, how much does GPA account for a student's likelihood to enroll at a given institution, and how much does financial aid or family income, or, there are all sorts of demographics, and that's where we're kind of building the plan. And oftentimes, unfortunately, I saw this when I first started in higher ed, and it still is the case today, that a lot of institutions are kind of too siloed. So, the financial aid office is operating in one space, and admissions is in another, and retention is in another, and there isn't enough kind of communication happening there. But where it works best is for the schools that see the relationship between all of these different factors and are open-minded to, like you said, okay, we want to grow our enrollment by 10%. Is that a situation where increasing the discount rate is the best way to achieve that? Or, do you need to get more applicants in the funnel? Do you need to get more inquiries into the top of the funnel? So I think what we do is a combination of, some complex statistical analyses, and also some much simpler descriptive analyses where we're looking at, okay, I remember with one particular client once, they had an enrollment goal in a particular program, and that enrollment goal was higher than the inquiries for that program, was higher than the applicants for that program. So no amount of financial aid is going to produce, people who don't exist. Right. So in those cases, we have to say, okay, this is a bigger problem. It's not always a problem that we address. We're not, marketing people. But we're good at using the data to identify what needs to be fixed here, what's possible. Sometimes schools will set enrollment targets or revenue targets that just aren't possible. Yeah. So it's a matter of having that conversation. But I mean, we work with some really great, smart partners who get it, and they're not, they're not putting all their eggs in one basket, or they're not looking to us to solve all of the issues. They understand that it has to be recruiting and marketing and, just investment in programs and buildings and all of that to bring in the students.
That's fantastic. And this actually makes me think of a conversation I had with, it might have been Syracuse, actually. I got to look back, but it was around I think the episode was called like the death of the inquiry, and how a lot of students are now just like the buyer journey for commerce, is that a lot of students do a lot more information searching ahead of time. So they're not like, they don't know they're not used to the typical process of, I submit an inquiry, and then an admissions officer or counselor reaches out to me, and then we have this conversation, and then I submit an application. They get hit by TikTok and Instagram ads. They find out about an institution. They look at their website and program selector. They're interested. They might watch some YouTube videos, listen to a podcast about a student story. The journey is very complex, but they've done all these things to gather information, and they just submit an application straight away. Is that a trend you're seeing with your clients as well? Just less inquiries and just straight to application?
Absolutely. So they're called stealth applicants, basically, and it's people who you don't know about until they apply, and that has grown. I mean, I remember when I started, it was maybe 5% of the applicant pool, and for many schools, it's now more than 50% of their applicant pool are people who they don't know about, and they don't have that ability to kind of communicate with them. And so it does, and that's where my expertise is very limited. It requires schools to kind of reach students where they are and be very creative about kind of their websites and optimizing search engines and, looking at digital advertising and all of that stuff that many of our clients work with smart folks who help them with that. But it is, yeah, it's one of the many things that makes enrollment managers' lives more difficult every year.
Always changing. Yep. Probably
Yep.
changing faster than ever.
Yep.
Well, this has been great. And I did just look up. It was Mike Sklens, and he was at Syracuse at the time I interviewed him, director of
Okay.
marketing strategy for recruitment.
Okay.
So
All right. Might have been after my time.
yeah, my memory serves me correct. Yeah, I think he was. I think I interviewed him like a year and a half ago, and he was somewhat new to the position.
Okay.
I can't remember
Okay.
exactly, but yeah. Well, this has
Nice.
been great. Thanks so much for all of the knowledge share and talking about pricing, because it's very hard to talk about in this
Yes.
industry. I'm wondering where our listeners can follow up with you and learn more about what you're up to or what HAI is up to.
Yeah, definitely. So our website is haianalytics.com. We have contact forms there. People are welcome to email me at ecoleman@haianalytics.com or reach out to me on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from folks.
Well, it's been so great having you. Thank you so much for joining, and thanks so much for listeners for tuning in.
All right. Thank you.